Whitley, County Judge.
Here.
Roy C. Brooks, Commissioner Precinct 1.
Present.
Marty Van Ravensway, Commissioner Precinct 2. Gary Fickus, Commissioner Precinct 3.
Here.
J.D. Johnson, Commissioner Precinct 4.
Here.
Constitutes a quorum.
Thank you. Our invocation this morning will be delivered by Reverend Stephen Hinton from Heart Song Fellowship, Saginaw, Texas. If everyone will please remain standing after the invocation for our pledges. Reverend Hinton, thank you again for coming down this morning.
You. God of truth and grace and all wisdom, we come asking for your help. Impart your character, your word, your wisdom to us today so that human weakness can experience strength, courage, and the ability to make sound, helpful, honest decisions for the good of all. We pray this for the sake of your word and your Son. Amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible.
You need coffee. You need a little more coffee. More coffee for you today.
Mr. Manius.
Thank you, Your Honor. Members of the Court, we have two announcements this morning. Both of them are on the administrator section. If we go there, A1, this concerns the legislative policy statement. There's a revised statement in your packet that I will mention where the change is as we get there this morning. Also, in your red folders, there is a revised out-of-state travel request. This is on the consent agenda. There are just some coding issues that we corrected. So those are the two announcements, Your Honor. Thank you.
Court members, you have before you the minutes of our March 17th meeting.
Move approval.
A motion is second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously. We have some proclamations and resolutions today. I guess our first, Commissioner Fickus, is yours.
Yes. We have a proclamation or a resolution to Dallas Baptist University. We don't really need to read it. We're going to present it to them on Thursday.
Okay.
Their new opening of their facility in Hurst. They call it the Hurst Colleyville facility. So just need I'll make a motion to approve the resolution.
Second.
We have motion second to approve the resolution. Any discussion?
Just that appropriate thing. He's a great
Yes, he was. And his wife is carrying that on, Patsy. So.
Please vote. Motion passes unanimously. Commissioner Johnson.
Yes, I have a congratulatory resolution for the city of Sampson Park. If I could get you to read that into the record, please.
Okay. Whereas in the 1920s, the city of Sampson Park developed as a residential community west of Fort Worth in west central Tarrant County, and whereas the development was named for a 7,000 acre ranch owned by Marion Sanson, a land and cattle baron in the early 1900s, and whereas the construction of the Jacksboro Highway in the 1930s and the establishment of military facilities during World War II increased the number of residents and businesses in the area, with the population growing to more than 1,000 people, and whereas 55 people unanimously voted to incorporate Sampson Park in March 1949, and whereas Sampson Park has had a colorful past which included cattle being driven to nearby stockyards, gangsters, and gamblers plying their trade along Jacksboro Highway, as well as the infamous Wilfong fireworks explosion. Hadn't heard about that one. And whereas most recently the city has adopted a new comprehensive land use plan to ensure quality and orderly future growth, including improving streets, upgrading the water system, and aggressively pursuing the redevelopment and beautification of the Jacksboro Highway commercial corridor. And whereas the city of Sampson Park will celebrate its 60th birthday on March 24th, 2000, that would be today, 2009, now therefore be it resolved that we, the Commissioners Court of Tarrant County, do hereby congratulate the City of Sampson Park for its 60 years as an outstanding incorporated city in Tarrant County. In witness whereof, we have heretofore set our hands and caused the seal of Tarrant County to be affixed this 24th day of March, 2009.
And I move for its approval.
Second. We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
And I'm probably not going to get this name right, but I know that we have three people. Sherry Dast, is that correct? Linda Claridge, and I believe our city manager, Tony White, is here. The mayor's son, I believe, had an accident over spring break and was unable, or is the mayor here?
No, this is our judge.
Oh.
City Judge too, Mike, so it's my pleasure to be here.
Well, welcome. Happy you're here.
Y'all come on down.
Bring the judge with you. I always like to have the judge on our side. It's hard to get around here. Tony, how are you? Long time no see.
I'm
How are
Sherry.
you doing? Sherry. Hi.
Mike, sir.
How are you? Brenda, how are you? Well, let me present this to you, and...
Y'all get around here so he can take a picture. Turn around here. He's trying to take a picture.
I'll do one more. Smile.
We're looking at this with you. Any comments you'd like to make? Thanks for being here.
Judge, honorable commissioners, the mayor was unable to be here. In his absence, he asked me to read a quick statement. He says, I truly apologize for not being able to attend this very special occasion, the birthday of our small town. My son has been very sick, and I have had to rearrange my entire schedule for his benefit, therefore not allowing me to attend this meeting. I would like to thank the Commissioners Court for this special recognition. The City of Sampson Park has been extremely fortunate to have Mr. J.D. Johnson as our Commissioner. He has always went above and beyond to help our small community complete many achievements. Partnership has been one of great success in my 10-year involvement as a councilman. The constituents as well as the council greatly appreciate Mr. Johnson's guidance and leadership. The city's 60th birthday will be a year of many accomplishments and changes to the overall perception to the City of Sampson Park. The city and council deeply appreciate you all for taking the time to recognize Sampson Park on this special day in our history. Thank you, Mayor Jim Barnett. Thank you.
Tell the mayor we're thinking of him and hope that his son does better. So.
Absolutely. Thank you. I believe y'all's festivities start at 2, is that right? Okay, we're going to try to stop by there for a little while. Okay.
Based on all those nice things they said about you, you don't have that many places that are saying that kind of nice things about you.
What can I say? Thank y'all. Thank you, Tony.
At this time, I'd like to call on Larry Wilson to recognize some of Tarrant County's employees.
Good morning. Commissioners Court, we're asking Commissioners Court this morning to recognize some employees who have completed degrees using the tuition reimbursement program. This program began in 1998, and since that time, over 350 employees have participated. If you remember, about a year ago, we recognized 42 employees in our first ever recognition ceremony, and since then, we've identified 9 other people who should have been recognized a year ago, and we've had 11 others that completed degrees in 2008. So as I'm going to call their names and ask them all to stand and be recognized by the court. And as I call your name, if you will just remain standing, and then at the end we will ask you to go out into the hallway for a photo op. Vivian Atkinson. I need 3 hands. Sherry Brown. Harry Cesar. Belinda Franklin. Clinton Harwell. Margot Lawson. Jesus Reyes. Randall Skinner. Greg Sumter. And the next 11 are people who completed degrees in 2008. Jamie Amron. Kara Hokestra. Stephanie Jones. Joshua Keenan. Barton Miller. Off one here. Christine Pinkston. Monica Tipton. Jeff Toller. Mark Ward. Laura Watts. And Don Woolley. And I should have had on the screen, Don graduated magna cum laude.
Congratulations again, and as Larry, I think, asked, if y'all will head outside, then they'll take a picture of you, and we'll again congratulate y'all. Thank you.
No refreshments.
No refreshments.
We want to do a receive and file.
Wilder, what are you going outside for? You thought there were refreshments, didn't you? Yeah, all right, I guess he's going outside. That's
Receive
count your blessings. We need a motion to receive and file.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to receive and file. Any further discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously. Court members, you have before you the consent agenda. Yes, the consent agenda.
Move approval.
Second. We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously. Mr. Manios.
Thank you, Your Honor. We have several items for the court this morning. The first, we're requesting that the Commissioners' Court consider and approve a legislative policy statement as it relates to county authority to regulate exploration, development, and production of natural gas. In the agenda announcements, I stated that we had a slight modification from the one that you might have received last Friday, and I believe that if you have an electronic court book, it's already in that book. But we also added as part of that statement that includes the imposition of adequate fees and fines for noncompliance to offset administrative costs. There are several pieces of legislation that are currently down in Austin that are attempt to grant us that authority. Senator Davis has actually introduced one that applies only to Tarrant County. I know that there's others that apply to counties that surround Tarrant County. We're requesting the court's approval at this time.
I'd like to thank Senator Davis for filing her piece of legislation. It's a great source of frustration to me and to many of the residents of the unincorporated area of Precinct 1 that there is so much drilling going on in their neighborhoods, and when problems develop, there's nothing that we can do. We need at least the same authority that cities have to prescribe some regulations on how drilling is to be accomplished and to provide some remedies when those regulations are ignored. So I move approval of this legislative policy statement with thanks to Senator Davis and others who have filed similar pieces of legislation.
Second, and I agree with you. I think the least that we should be willing to accept would be that we have the same authority that the extraterritorial properties that would be annexed by a city that the city has, and that would be better than what's out there right now.
Which is nothing.
Do we have a motion and a second? When you mention ETJs, the cities don't have any authority in the ETJs to regulate that, do they?
No.
Okay. So,
Personally, I'd like to see counties have more authority over land use in other areas other than drilling. So,
We've been talking about that for years.
I know, but
If they had the authority
sale.
at ETJ, they would just about cover the entire county. I
Yeah.
mean, there's very little area that's not in
somebody's
Fort Worth,
somebody's
somebody's
ETJ.
ETJ.
any other discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
Your Honor, members of court, so on item number 2, we're requesting that the Commissioners Court approve an oil and gas lease agreement with EOG Resources as relates to the lease of oil and gas mineral rights under county-owned property as described in your court order. There is one correction. In the title, we said this was in Precinct 1. It's actually in Precinct 2. And it's right at the intersection of 20 and 287 Business in the floodplain area. Your Honor, for the court's information, we did receive a signing bonus of $7,602 per acre, which is significantly more higher than what is being offered currently.
You want to try that again?
More higher?
One or the other.
Yes, it is. You know, let me finish this before I'll take questions at the end of it.
Greater, have to jump in there on that
It's
one.
greater than what others are receiving today, plus it's a 25% royalty.
Sounds like a deal.
Finally, sounds like we're getting more than what anybody else is getting in this deal, as opposed to a whole lot less. Even though this is a whole lot less than what
We'll take a
we
motion
previously
in a
got.
second.
Move for approval.
Second.
We have motion and second. Any other,
Only because it's more higher.
any other abuse at this time?
it's a bunch better, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
This is my natural color, by the way. It's just a shade red. Sorry about that. Okay, item number 3. We're requesting that the court accept the donation to Tarrant County as relates to 2 historical portraits that have been given to us.
Oh, you're not going to try to pronounce that last
These are
name, are you?
portraits of Mr. and Mrs. Thomas Jefferson Jennings, from the Amon Carter Museum. I think that Commissioner Fickus may have some comments.
Who were the artists on that?
I can tell you, it was Eugene Perrault.
Perrault.
And he
Very good.
and the artist was from France. And he moved to Texas in 1850. He moved to the United
artist
States.
or Jenny?
The artist. I'm going to tell you a little about the artist. He moved to Texas in 1852, and he entered the Texas Army in the battle in the Civil War. Fought on the South side of the Civil War. He was a painter. He kind of moved around the country painting portraits. He was known as an itinerant painter, whatever that means. And
Moving around the country on the corner.
he was a portrait painter, and that's how he made his living. And he ended up in Sonoma, California, and he's buried there. And I actually have a picture of his gravestone.
Wow.
But and he's did a lot of paintings out in that area. But he painted Mr. and Miss Jennings about in 1877. And I'll tell you a little bit about the Jennings family, because and here's the beautiful portraits. I'll pass this around to the court, and then if anybody else would like to look at this, they're gorgeous people. Mr. Jennings, Thomas Jefferson Jennings, was an attorney general for the state of Texas from 1852 to 1856. He did not run again. He decided to become a state legislature at that time in Cherokee County. He moved to Fort Worth in 1874.
He was going to play a little background.
He moved to Fort Worth in 1874, and he was one of the parties that were offering land to the railroad to build in Fort Worth. He died in 1881. His wife, Sarah, before he married her, she was a widow of a Texas soldier who was killed in the War of Independence for Texas. And for that, she received 1,280 acres in Tarrant County as a widow of a war veteran. And part of that land was downtown Fort Worth. She gave land for the first city park in Fort Worth called Hyde Park, which was named for her parents. In the early 1890s, she changed the wording on that gift to allow a Carnegie Library to be built on that site. The city of Fort Worth currently is, evidently that library's not here anymore.
No, it's not.
And the city is looking at redoing that land and making it back into a park. So her family, her sons and her daughters married prominent families in Fort Worth. Hyatt Jennings, her son, married the daughter of K.M. Van Zandt, who was the father and the founder of the Fort Worth National Bank. These paintings were donated to the county in 1971 by the Bewley family. And let me give you just a little quote on this gentleman when Mr. Thomas Jefferson Jennings, just to show you that some things go on forever. As a state representative, he opposed, this is in 1857, he opposed the founding of the University of Texas, evidently out of concern that Austin would corrupt the morals of the students. So, some things don't change.
Pretty pathetic.
So I would hope we would accept these paintings, and I think our goal is they're going to the archives, but I would like to see us start displaying, and probably start with these two paintings, displaying them, maybe outside in our foyer, maybe somewhere else, but on a periodic basis, every 180 days, change them out with other artifacts that we have in our archives, other paintings and things like that. So I would make a motion to accept this donation from the Amon Carter Museum.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
I have a comment.
Sure.
By way of full disclosure, Mr. Jennings was a slave owner, and some might take the position that a portrait of someone who engaged in that activity should not be a part of our archives and should not be displayed on our property. My position is that you cannot change the lessons learned from the past either by ignoring our history or by trying to rewrite it. Slavery was a part of the heritage of the state of Texas. We have learned many things about human beings since that period of time. My only request would be that when we hang these portraits, that we put them in the proper context.
Exactly.
And so that people who view them will know the history of the time and will know that our hanging of them is neither an act of condoning the past, but merely a recognition of how we got to this present day.
Thank you, Commissioner Brooks. Any other discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
Judge, I don't have a discussion about that particular item, but I would like to remind everyone that hanging in the small conference room behind us are 6 original lithographs from the 1936 State Fair that were donated by Professor Alan Sachs from UTA.
Cool. Didn't know that.
Your Honor, Members of the Court, if we could move to item number 4, we're requesting that the Commissioners' Court authorize removal of assets no longer on hand and or no longer belonging to the county from the county's asset management system.
Move approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
Finally, Your Honor, Members of the Court, on item number 5, we're requesting that the Court approve service provider contracts for those entities that are listed in your court communication as it relates to the fiscal year 2008 grant renewal with HUD for tenant-based leasing assistance. Just want to tell you that that we believe that we're going to receive this funding. As usual, it trails the start of the fiscal year. We believe that we'll have these monies available to us by July. What we're asking for here is approval of these contracts and pre-funding of those contracts that will be reimbursed whenever we receive the federal funding.
Move approval.
A second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Ms. Tidwell.
This morning, we're asking that the Commissioners Court receive and file the Auditor's Report of Controls over cash receipts of the Public Health Department, specifically at the Southwest Immunization Clinic. I would point out that this clinic's staff is very small, including the nursing staff and non-administrative staff, and we've worked with Public Health. They've been very responsive, very interested in making changes to limit the risk associated with just a situation where you just don't have a lot of staff. So you have their response attached, or included, I guess.
Move approval to accept.
Second. We have a motion and a second to receive and file. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously. Ms. Glenn? Whoop.
Move to receive and file the personnel agenda.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to receive and file the personnel agenda. Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
Good morning. Our second item is to request approval of a waiver of terminal benefits for the 297th District Court. That court coordinator will be leaving April the 21st with 400 hours of vacation, and the waiver net effect will be $8,468.22.
Move for approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
Our third item is a waiver of terminal benefits also for the Sheriff's Department. A general office clerk left the records area on March 25th, and they would like to request a waiver for the remaining 264 hours with a cost of $5,018.64.
Move for approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Mr. Beecham?
Good morning. We have two items for your consideration this morning. Our first item is a bid award recommendation for bid number 2009-049. It's an annual contract for fire alarm, fire sprinkler inspections, and backflow preventer testing. Recommendation will be toward a per enterprise basis to the primary and secondary vendors as shown in your court communique.
Move for approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
Your Honor, I forgot to mention on the agenda announcements that on item number 2, under purchasing, we're going to hold that for 1 week. We need to do a clarification on that particular item.
Okay, thank you, sir. Go ahead.
Our last item, number 3, is another bid award recommendation for bid number 2009-057. It's an annual contract for locksmith services and supplies. Recommendation again will be toward a per enterprise basis to the primary and secondary vendors as shown in your court communique.
Move approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Lamb?
I'm here this morning to request that Commissioners Court approve a resolution in an order decreeing public necessity for a public project known as Katy Road. It's located at the intersection of US 377, Katy Road, and the Union Pacific Railroad. We're asking that court approve the preliminary plans and authorize the acquisition and payment of compensation for 2 small parcels.
Move approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you.
When is the railroad going to put the crossing in?
Every time I email them, it's in the next couple of weeks, and I will knowledge, that's been for a year and a half.
Is this a TxDOT problem?
It's not a
Some
TxDOT.
drainage deal, or is this the railroad's problem?
There is a TxDOT problem with the drainage. I think that's been resolved. The county engineer's been working with it. I think that's resolved. It is a railroad problem. They closed the crossing while you were in office.
In the middle of the night.
Yes, sir, and we've been working with them ever since, trying to get it reopened. I email them regularly, and they assure me it's going to be open. The gates are in place. The crossing is not.
I've been asking for 3 months, when are they going to do it? And I've yet to hear anybody tell me anything that the railroad has said.
All they tell me is within the next few weeks, they'll have a crew out there. I don't know what to say.
And you're hearing this from the...
Yes, sir. I talked to Steve Marchinke at the railroad. That's my contact.
Union Pacific has a new person here that's supposed to be their governmental guy, Clint, somebody?
I think that Carolyn may have given me Clint's name, but I'm not having any success. It's not for lack of trying. It's not for lack of emailing and talking to them. I'm not having any success.
Let us try one more week.
It's a horrible situation for traffic and safety where cars are turning now onto Kaler to go across the railroad tracks that are stacking up, and you got other cars. I mean, it's just, and they got to go around. You know, if they're headed north, they got to go down, turn around.
Yes, sir. It's not a good crossing at Kaler, and I talked to the city of Fort Worth about that and asked them to apply some pressure. I'm at their mercy, and I don't know what else to do about that.
Okay.
Commissioner, give us one more week on it. We'll
Well,
agendize this.
May I say so? I don't think that this railroad parcel, the right-of-way parcels needs to be delayed.
Not on this one. I'm talking about solving the other issue.
All right.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thanks.
You're not talking about that.
I thought I had his card with me, but obviously I don't.
It's not easy to get anything done with that railroad.
And I do have some contact information. I'd be glad to forward to
Well, there is a
both of
new
you.
person in town that's supposed to be
Thank you.
doing that, so.
They are pretty difficult to deal with.
Yeah, they completely isolated a community with 200 and something houses here 2 or 3 months ago. I had to make arrangements to go through Walsh Ranch on private gravel roads to get the people out on Sunday while they repaired this crossing. That was their only ingress, egress to that addition.
They probably didn't even think about how they were going to get out. Didn't concern them.
You have before you the claims, including the addendum?
Move approval of the claims, including the addendum.
Second.
A motion and a second to approve the claims, including the addendum. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously. Briefing items, Mr. Manion?
Your Honor, we have several items for you this morning. The first one concerns the annual briefing from the 911 Emergency Assistance District. Mr. Greg Petrie is here to address the court at this time. Good morning. Thank you, sir. We can handle this, please.
Your Honor, Commissioners, Mr. Mania, staff, thank you for allowing me to brief you this morning concerning the activities of the Tarrant County 911 District. It's definitely an honor to be here this morning. I thought I'd show you briefly, again, a pictorial representation of the district. Includes all of Tarrant County, all cities partially within the county, DFW Airport, and the city of Irving. We have 50 public safety answering points, as PSAPs as we call them. 35 of those are primary, 6 are secondary, 7 are backup or emergency operations centers, and 2 of those are training. We have 41 member entities in the district, 38 cities, Tarrant County, DFW Airport, and the Naval Air Station. Population of well over 2 million within the district. Depending on whose statistics you use, it could be 2.2, 2.4 million. Approximately 1,100 square miles territory within our district. 1.3 million landline database records in our system. And we estimate we have about 1.4 million wireless devices, and sometimes I feel like everybody calls it once. Last year, 2008, all of our member agencies answered 2.1 million 911 calls. 72% of those were via 6 wireless carriers. December of 2008, those were 74% of the calls, And the newest statistics I have for February 2009, it was 74.72% of calls were from wireless devices.
That's amazing.
What it takes for the district to be successful, responsive customer service has to be number one. The remainder of the items listed there can be in any order. State-of-the-art systems, financial stability, a progressive board of managers, and I certainly appreciate your appointment of Rick Brunson to our board, excellent staff, and we have to remain a leader in industry. We're involved with a definitely changing revenue environment. When the district was created in 1984, we only had landline revenue, in fact, only had landline telephones. In the early 1990s, the wireless devices took off, and you can see how our revenues of those wireless devices took off through FY 2008. We're seeing a definite flattening of the wireless trends and a continued and somewhat accelerated decrease in the wireline revenues. We're about 7% down on the wireline revenues and very flat on the wireless revenues through this fiscal year. Wireless, as I mentioned before, is almost 75% of our calls. It will definitely be 75 before the end of the year, and I believe approaching 80 as more and more people disconnect their wireline telephones. I thought we would go through very, very quickly the wireless call flow because it's very important. A wireless caller calls 911, and I've done something. I always do that. A wireless caller calls 911, and that call is processed through the wireless carrier's macro network, as it's called, to the MSC, or mobile switching center. That can be locally, or in some cases, there's a national center for that. That call then processes to what is called a mobile processing center or provisioning center. Information such as the mobile directory number, which MSC it came from, and cell site and sector is transmitted with the call through the MPC. The MPC then requests a location request from the position determining entity. That can be a service, that can be something housed locally. It's very different ways to do that based on which carrier you are. That position determining entity then returns a routing number and a longitude and latitude through the MPC back to the MSC with what's now called an ESRK. ESRK is an emergency service routing key, and that's what helps us determine which public safety answering point that call needs to go to. That routing number, or ESRK, is sent to the selective router where it's looked up and determined which public safety answering point that call needs to go to based on the ESN, emergency service number. I cannot take a week's vacation because I get acronym behind.
I believe it.
And then I don't know what I'm talking about. You can't take a whole week's of vacation in this industry. That routing number then determines which public safety answering point it goes to. That answering point looks up in the database, which is AT&T's database. It then recognizes that number is not in its database, sends it to a third-party database, which goes to the mobile processing center, which returns the longitude and latitude callback number and the location description through the AT&T database back to the public safety answering point, and then we make a dump to the CAD system, computer dispatch system, and the routing software that we have in that facility. That's all taken about 3 seconds.
3 seconds.
For that entire call to process, voice was transmitted before anything else was. Wow. Much quicker than I can talk about it and remember all the acronyms. So what is the state of wireless in Tarrant County?
Could you go back to that for just a second?
Absolutely, sir. I will hope so. Yes, sir.
So it determines the latitude and longitude twice. Is that because they think that somebody's moved?
It actually determines the longitude and latitude one time. It transmits it multiple times based on the original location.
And that's based upon where the cell phone's supposed to be at the time that the call's made?
Yes, sir. You can request, and we'll talk about it a little bit later, a retransmit, and you can request a new location For instance, if you felt like that caller was driving down the freeway, the call taker can request a new location, and it essentially does this whole process over again.
Okay. So if I'm reporting an accident and I'm driving down the freeway, unless I stop, it's liable to call the wrong jurisdiction based on where my phone is when it connects.
When your initial call is made, yes.
Okay.
Absolutely. So what is the state of wireless in Tarrant County? Wireless-only households. We talked about that very briefly. A study was done last year that said more than 20 million U.S. households were wireless only. Some studies predict that 1 in 5 U.S. households will be wireless by the end of 2008. The Center for Disease Control on March 11, 2009, released a report concerning 2007 data. In that report, 20.9% of Texas households admitted to being wireless only. They also make a statement that we would expect that today, 2009, those percentages would have increased by at least 5%. So we're looking at somewhere in the neighborhood of 25, possibly 30% of households are wireless only. My two daughters, both of my 20-something daughters, neither one of them have landline telephones. They say, why do we need one? Everybody calls us on our cell. I can't argue with that except from the safety factor. If they had families and had children, I would certainly insist that they have a landline phone for the babysitter, if nothing else. Cutting the landline saves about $40 a month. In this particular time, everybody's looking at saving money. It's most popular in lower income households where they only have one device. Current recession is likely, and I think you can take likely out of there now, is accelerating this process. There are two types of carriers in the wireless industry, postpaid carriers and a prepaid carrier. Postpaid carriers, you have a contract, usually a 2-year agreement. The charges are billed monthly, and the charges are billed after usage. If you stay within your plan, you get a fixed rate. If you exceed your plan, then you get additional billing. The prepaid carriers, there's no contract. You go by minutes, whether it be a card, whether it be a download, and the prepaid carriers resell the postpaid carrier network. In other words, if you have a Go phone, for instance, it rides AT&T's network. If you have a track phone, it rides Verizon's network. They buy wholesale minutes from those carriers. 911 calls from uninitialized phone, or what I've termed here non-service initiated phones, have become an increasing issue for the public safety answering points. The main reason is they do not get a valid callback number. We did a study in 2007 and 2008 where 17% of the wireless calls were from uninitialized handsets in both of these studies. In 2007, there was 11% of the total 911 calls were from uninitialized sets, and 12% in 2008. This continues to be a growing trend and a growing issue for us. Uninitialized phones, quite simply, are phones that no longer have a contract associated with them. It's an old phone that you pass down for some reason to a mother, a son, whatever it happens to be, where they can have an emergency phone. If they call 911, then we don't get a valid callback number. We still get location, still get the valuable information, I guess you would say, but we have no way of calling them back. Program testing, performance testing program. This is something that we initiated in 2005. We saw the growing trend of wireless calls and knew that we need to provide our public safety answering points more information on how to handle these calls. So we began this program in late 2005 when I was the operations manager. To date, we have 4,500 documented wireless test calls within our testing program. We have tested every PSAP, both primary and secondary, backups and training. Test sites are random points on every MAPSCO page in the Tarrant County book. Test every aspect of the 911 call. Can the caller hear or be heard? The famous Verizon commercial, can you hear me now? That's exactly what we did. Did the call reach the intended public safety answering point? Back to Judge Whitley's question. Did the PSAP get the callback number? Back to the uninitialized question. Was a call roaming to another network? We were in AT&T, test an AT&T phone and it came in on the Verizon network. Very, very rarely we've determined. What was the class of service? And we'll talk a little bit more about that. What was the UNC or uncertainty? We'll talk a little bit more about that in just a moment. And what was the accuracy of the location? Was it 10 meters off, 100 meters off, or 1,000 meters off? The tester in the PSAP provides very useful information about the PSAP. Having Mr. Manus has trouble adding words in there this morning. It identifies training opportunities, identifies problems with CPE in the PSAP. I'm going to be stabbed in the back now. I can tell.
Yeah, you're in trouble.
Identifies problem with transfers between public safety answering points, especially in the jurisdictions of the COG, for instance, who might not be phase 2 at that particular moment or might not have the wireless capabilities that we do. Identifies problem with transfers from PSAPs to neighboring jurisdictions. This performance testing resulted in a customized wireless training that we call Waldo Training. Where's Waldo? Based upon this training, we put a caller in the intersection, actually on the curb, because I didn't think risk management would like it if I put them in the middle of the intersection. We actually put them on the curb and make a call through the 911 network to the PSAP, and they have to find Waldo. Is Waldo where Waldo thinks he is? Can you find him? He's at the intersection of Jones Road and Smith Street. How close is he to that particular area? It greatly simplified the original wireless training material. Originally, each carrier had a 2-inch binder of training material for each public safety answering point. It emphasizes finding the wireless caller, and that's the key to inside the public safety answering points. It works with uninitialized phone, working cell phones, or anything in between. We've received lots of positive feedback from all of our PSAPs, and to pat ourselves on the back just a little bit, our Waldo training has been recognized by the Federal Communications Commission as the standard for wireless testing and has been adopted in Oklahoma and New Mexico for statewide testing. So what are the mobile classes of service? MOBL is mobile. You may or may not get a callback number, and you will not get caller location. This is what we call phase 0.5. So where it goes through the wireless network, through the 911 network to the proper PSAP, but you don't get much information. Wireless, or WRLS, is what can easily be called phase 1. You'll get a callback number. You must hit the retransmit button and attempt to get the caller's location. Wireless phase 2, which the majority of our carriers deliver that on the initial call, we have caller location and map identification. So what were the results of our testing? The FCC, Federal Communications Commission, requires location within 50 to 100 meters, depending upon the type of carrier, whether it be handset-based, GPS in the phone, or triangulation, which is called the network approach. Batch 1, 79.8% of all of our test calls met that standard. Batch 2, 87%, and our most recent batch, nearly 90%. All 6 carriers met this requirement. The FCC also requires that within 150 or 300 meters, again depending upon the type of network, the call must be, 95% of the time, the call must meet those criteria. Batch 1, we had about 88%, batch 2 about 90%, batch 3 about 91%. 2 of the 6 carriers met those requirements, and the other 4 were very, very close. Why did they fail to meet this accuracy? Generally, it was deviation greater than allowed. In other words, they were farther off on their location than we have set the parameters arbitrarily within our system. Stayed wireless on the rebid. In other words, it never rebid. You'll see the note at the bottom. We only allow 1 rebid in our testing procedure, but over half of those did display the proper location information after the second rebid. but they failed because one rebid is our criteria. Other might be the network was down, the location technology was down the particular day we tested, and about 5% have never updated from mobile class of service. There's one carrier, uninitialized phone, they actually turn off the GPS chip. So if it's an uninitialized phone, then that can't display. So we used uncertainty as a predictor of accuracy. If the uncertainty was less than 150, and uncertainty is a number that the carriers bring us of how accurate they think their GPS coordinates are, and if the deviation or the location of the caller versus where they really were, where it was displayed, is less than 100 meters. In batch 1, we had 86% of those, batch 2, 90%, and batch 3 was 92.7%. And this is the basis for Waldo's training recommendation. As I told you earlier, when I first came to the district, we had 6 2-inch binders. Each carrier had a different way of handling calls. I instructed staff that unless we could put that on a sticky note, it was useless in the PSAP. So this is what we did. If the uncertainty is less than 150, there is a 92% chance the caller is within 100 meters of the identified location. I have 2 quick stories for you. In Irving, a lady called and said she was having a medical emergency. She pulled off the freeway into a parking lot, and that's the only information that she could give the call taker. The call taker, using the Waldo training that we had just given them, identified the call as the parking lot at Smith and Main Street. I don't remember the exact address. She could not get the caller back on the line. She dispatched an EMS unit to this parking lot. The EMS unit, using their skills that they had developed, drove through the parking lot, found a car, crooked in a parking spot with the brake lights still on, and there was our lady having a diabetic emergency. So the Waldo training in this statement saved that woman's life, I feel sure. Another interesting story, I believe it was Lake Worth, but I'm not exactly sure. We're being inundated by mischievous 911 calls. They could tell it was kids calling. It was an uninitialized phone. They put up with it all day Saturday. It started again on Sunday. They finally called our wireless manager and said, "What can I do about this?" They met this criteria, and we said, "Dispatch a unit. You got a 92% chance that they're at the location that you have." Make a long story short, the officer came around the corner, this group of kids scattered like a covey of quail. Those calls have now ceased. So it's obvious that the wireless location technology works in our locations. Next generation 911, the next generation of 911 service. You hear a lot of hype about this. You hear a lot of stories about this PSAP, that PSAP, this state, that state being next gen. There's no such thing as next generation 911 today. Most of the elements that are needed to produce a next-gen call haven't even been developed yet. So you'll hear a lot about this. But what are we doing to prepare for that? This is the true definition of next-generation 911. I'll give you about 3 seconds to read that. Actually, we're not going to read it because it's too much detail. These are the 4 points that I'd like for you to take away from this. Next Generation 911 will fully replace the existing enhanced 911 network with all the capabilities and functions that we have today. This is the process that we're working on now. Next fiscal year, we'll be replacing, or beginning to replace, the equipment and the network from the telephone-based or landline-based, whatever words you want to use, the public switch network-based 911 system that we have today with a true IP, Internet Protocol network. It's not the Big I Internet. It's not the public Internet. It uses Internet protocols, but it will be a public safety grade private network. We'll be connecting all 50 locations next fiscal year with that network, and then begin an equipment replacement. In subsequent years, we'll add capabilities to support changes for current and new types of originating service providers. VoIP, Voice over Internet Protocol. Nomadic VoIP came up a couple of years ago, and we had to massage it and cram it into the existing network. We'll be able to, VoIP calls will be able to flow directly into the new network. Add flexibility for PSAPs and 911 authorities. What we would like to be able to do is to have virtual public safety answering points. We've talked a lot about pandemic flu. The Health Department's given you several presentations on pandemic flu. What if we have a pandemic flu event? This network would allow us to diversify the calls. We could even take calls from home if that's what was required. And we'll add capabilities to integrate and interoperate with emergency entities, key word, beyond the PSAP. If we have to integrate with Homeland Security, have to integrate with Melissa and emergency operations, whatever it happens to be, we'll have a streamless network that will be able to do that. So that's next generation as we look at it. We're putting the IP network in, we're updating the infrastructure, and then we'll be ready when text messaging, video, and all the other portions of the true next generation 911 are available. What will it cost? That's the magic ball. We don't know what it is. I wish I had my crystal ball, but it has several cracks in it. I do know for sure that replacing the network and replacing the equipment will cost no less than they did in 2000. When we did the 2000 upgrade, that was $16 million. I know that it will cost that. I expect it to be exponential in that cost, but we don't know what those are. So it's very important that we keep our funding, we keep our reserves, and we keep working towards next generation 911. So what's next? Contingency planning. Contingency planning is top on my priority list, both from the PSAP environment and the district environment. VDB, ERDB, you've heard me talk about this before. This is the verification database, the emergency routing database. That's what makes these new services look like normal or landline calls within the public safety answering point. Next generation 911, we just talked about it. Funding. Funding is a key issue for us. As the landline revenues erode, that's the only ones we have control of. Wireless, VoIP, some of the others are done on a statewide basis. There are two bills in the legislature right now that would cut the wireless service fee from 50 cents to 40 cents and would exempt prepaid wireless, which is the largest part of the growing market. We're, of course, opposed to those two bills because we do not need to erode any of our wireless funding. Service and support. The service and support model is changing. AT&T has been our service provider for 25 years. As we work into the IP environment, can they still be our service provider, or should we be taking that on? And vision. What is our vision? I did it again.
Now hit your, yeah.
Thank you. Greg's vision. I think I developed this, but I'm going to take credit for it even if I didn't. We have to plan today to implement technology 2 years from now that hasn't even been thought of yet. I've said this for a couple of years, and your board appointee, Rick Brunson, I believe tongue-in-cheek said, prove it. So I'm going to prove it. I call it back to the future. Nomadic VoIP and pre-I2, that was in late 2005, the Federal Communications Commission said, you're going to make these Vonage calls look like landline calls, and you have 60 days to do it. Oh, and by the way, we don't have any money to help you with this.
No, of course. Sounds familiar.
How many times have you heard that exact statement? We did it in 59 days. I don't know how, but we did it. Metro PCS, who would have ever thought that a new wireless carrier would come in and sweep up leftover frequencies from the merger of AT&T and Singular One, I believe it was. AT&T and Singular. Who would have ever thought a new carrier would have come in and swept those up? Metro PCS is the largest, fastest growing wireless carrier in the southern states. Again, we had 100 days to implement that. Sync. and this, if you have 20-year-old daughters, this is not NSYNC, but this is Sync. Sync is the Ford's equivalent to OnStar. However, it uses your own cell phone instead of an OnStar transmitter. So it goes directly to the public safety answering point. We had to plan and prepare for that almost overnight. Converged services, wireless and VoIP. You're seeing more of your services being converged, wireless and voice over internet protocol. T-Mobile at Home was the first one of those. Use a special T-Mobile dual band phone, and if you're sitting at home, you talk through a wireless device through your high-speed internet connection and not use your minutes. If you step outside your house, then you're on your T-Mobile minutes. Femtocell, slightly different. A femtocell is actually a wireless transmitter. Sprint Airwave was the first one that we have in our testing lab. Verizon Network Extender we've just put in our testing lab. And then we have Magic Jack, which I term here as a weird form of VoIP. It's a little device about the size of a pack of gum you plug into your computer, into your PC, and it turns your PC into a VoIP, a voice over internet phone. A little odd working, and in my case, not very reliable. A femtocell, as I mentioned just before, and I'm nearly finished, is a small cellular base station that a customer can purchase and put in their home. If they happen to be on a fringe area of wireless coverage, then that gives them better coverage within their house. It uses your broadband connection or your high-speed internet connection instead of the wireless network. However, this uses licensed spectrum, so it can't be moved around quite as much as the T-Mobile at Home device can be. This is a little bit of a depiction. It's very hard to see, and I apologize for that. It's the best diagram I could find, showing a femtocell in a residence. You've got your wireless phone, your PDA, even your computer connects to this femtocell and operates through the internet, the public internet, instead of the wireless network. In some carriers' cases, you don't incur minutes if you're tied to the femtocell. In others, it's simply a network extension. We've had some very successful testing with these. We've also had some problems in our testing because it's not confined just to your house. Your neighbor could call too, and maybe they're in a different jurisdiction. We had an instance in testing where two neighbors back to back, one across the alley had a pool. We went over there and tested, and it went to the wrong jurisdiction because the alley was the city limits line. So there are some drawbacks, and I believe the industry is working hard on those. Last year you saw this slide concerning public marketing, and I'll draw your attention to one phrase. We're not just passing out pencils anymore. However, in 2007-2008, we provided public education materials for 63,000 school-aged children and 54,000 adults, and that's about 350,000 public education items, whether that be pencils, keychains, coloring books, whatever it happens to be, depending on the age group. I've encouraged our public education staff to give me a proposal on what it would take to increase that number to 500,000, a million. I think that's something that we need to step up a little bit farther and do. The same thing with training. Since we moved to our new facility on Airport Freeway, we've completed about 800 hours of training within that site. Critical, which is a pre-employment hiring testing. We've done 90 hours of testing there. Online training classes, this graphic says 60. Yesterday it was up to about 700 hours of online training. Been very, very popular. We did not think it would be, but it's been very, very popular with our public safety answering points. On-site field training, 357 hours, and dozens of other classes that are either in the planning stage or enrollment stages. One, in fact, tomorrow. So again, I've asked the training staff to give me an idea of what it would take to ramp up even more training. I feel like in these tougher economic times that the two things that will be lost from our public safety answering points will be public education and training. So I think it's important that we step up and be able to assist in that and provide more services to our public safety answering points. Thank you for your time. I exceeded my 15 minutes. I do apologize for that, but I'll be more than happy to answer any questions that you might have. Quickly, you also notice that I had Mr. Manius distribute our current newsletter. You may have received this in the mail, but it's just been mailed. I draw your attention to two things. The National Emergency Number Association National Conference will be in Fort Worth next June. We encourage each of you to attend if you can. There's some valuable information that will be available there. You also see my article, and we start talking about next generation and what next generation is and how the district will begin implementing next generation. Thank you very much, and I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Commissioner Vickers?
Yeah, Greg, what's the rationale or the reason that these bills were introduced to reduce your service fees on wireless? You mentioned 40% or, and who's introduced them? And
I'm sorry, I should have written down the numbers for you, and I'll be happy to get those back to you. I did not write those down this morning. I believe the 40-cent reduction, or the 10-cent reduction to 40 cents, was introduced because the state really hasn't used their share of it. The districts, like ourselves, we've used every penny for the intended purpose. The state's still sitting there to help balance the budget, and I believe that there's some people that are opposing that. As far as the prepaid is concerned, the Gray Panthers, I believe, is the group that senior. They're opposing that because that's their primary use of cell phones. We think that rationale is wrong. We think that they should pay 50 cents just like somebody with a contract, especially with 75% of our calls coming from wireless carriers. We think everybody should pay the same. We spend every penny of our wireless resources. We had some reserve funds for equipment purchases, but we're quickly going to deplete those with next generation.
Okay. Are any of your all your callers in your call center, have there ever been any consideration to allowing that to be kind of a, call from the home or answer from the home call center?
Technology will allow us to do that. The biggest problem is, how do you reconnect to the CAD systems, for instance, to be able to put the call in for service, or if it's a dispatch-only environment, like some of our smaller agencies, you take the call, you enter the call, you dispatch the call. How could you do all that from home? But I think technology, as we go forward, will address some of that, and especially the ability to ramp up. For instance, if you had a bad weather event or a chemical spill or something like that, you could ramp up additional call takers at home. The infomercial industry has done it for years. Most of the operators you talk to, if you call in for an infomercial, are sitting in their living room. So we just need to expand that into public safety, but there's lots of considerations to be able to do that.
And I guess, the only other thing one of the things that I wish 911 could take care of is when I'm driving down the road and somebody, Commissioner Johnson, somebody got blasted by about 100 miles an hour in their big trucks. Is there any technology that ever hopes that we're going to be able to call ahead and try to catch someone that's
doing buy a bigger truck?
It's really those motorcycles I'm worried about.
Current technology only allows one or possibly two conferencings on a 911 call, so you can conference ahead, for lack of a better term, but it's very difficult. The next generation, the IP-enabled network, allows you more of those. So to be able to tell you that we're going to be able to catch that motorcyclist that's doing a wheel stand to avoid the toll booth, I can't tell you that we're going to do that, but I think we'll have the technology to be able to move that down faster, move that down the road, for lack of a better term, faster.
Avoid the toll booth. I had never really thought of it that way, but I guess that might be.
Go through there, you can't read your license.
If you go through the toll booth doing a wheel stand, they can't read your license plate.
You need to try that.
Reading the license plate would be the least of my concern.
And I don't own a motorcycle, so it's not me.
Any other questions? Greg, thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your time.
Mr. Manius, anything else today?
Just one item, Your Honor, as it relates to the stimulus package, just a very quick comment. Yesterday, I was in attendance with a meeting with the City of Fort Worth, the three chambers, and the federal lobbyists for the city. We went through a lot of the stimulus package issues. We took that and the handouts and brought them to our staff to look at to see if there were any gaps. And we're pretty much on target as far as what we know and what's happening in Washington as it relates to the stimulus package. So
I had picked up a packet last week that one of the U.S. senators had put together, and I think if you haven't gotten a copy of it downstairs yet, I
would appreciate it.
Ask them to copy it, and it kind of goes through each area with the designated funds that were given to the secretaries. I think each secretary was given a discretionary amount, and there are grants coming out of each one of those various cabinet departments.
The bulk of the money looks like formula funding, but there is some discretionary funding in almost every one of those. So we're pretty much on top of that. Your Honor, I know that when we go into closed session, we just have a very quick item we need to talk about in closed.
Okay.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Anything else, court members? Commissioner Court will now recess.
What about appointments today?
Not today.
Well, I'm sorry.
I just forgot all about that.
Not on the agenda, Roy.
See, it would have been a whole lot better had you not gone around and checked with everybody, because then we might have been able to
that's
skate over that.
That would have been a more better idea.
Yeah, it would have been.
And now the Commissioners Court will recess the open session and proceed to closed session to discuss items exempted under Sections 551.071, 072, 074, 076, and 087 of the Texas Government Code.